Hi,
Hi, Natalia.
how are you?
Great. And you?
Good, good. Thanks for being here.
No, thank you for the opportunity and for everyone tuning in.
Of course. So we're gonna be talking today about Lina's work. Maybe we can start with some slides that we prepared. And let's talk about this work.
Yes. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone in America Society and Natalia for the invitation. An honor to be here. I chose a series of images from the last decade. I started my career mostly in my mid-30s, so a little bit later than most artists. And this work, even though it's from 2010, it's from a series of works that I started in 2005 of working water fountains inside of suitcases. And I call it Ave del Peritoneo. And all of the centerpiece is made in ceramic that I modeled myself and placed them inside. And it's peritoneo is like part of the intestines and the visceral in our body. So it's bringing in anatomical forms that reference the body, but mixing it with botanical to create these hybrids of botanical and anatomical forms.
Yes. Let's see the next one. And this is kind of following the same idea of creating this. I guess I would call it. I don't know, like little worlds that you create.
Yes, this
like
is
ecosystems.
Exactly. This is I have like these series of contained works, sort of like how the body is contained, but looking at the body in a non-scientific way, and seeing and looking at the body at the interior of the body, especially as a landscape and something that is magical and wondrous.
Mm-hmm. Let's see the next one. And I want to talk about your the idea of, I guess, creating or mixing these textures with nature and also these anthropomorphic forms. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I love materials, so I collect all different kinds, and I have basically like boxes of different materials that I'm really attracted to, and I don't have a plan in mind. And for instance, with these works, even the ceramic pieces, I make them and I don't necessarily know what. Sometimes I have a plan, and other times I just make especially in this piece here on top, it has like a little rock that looks a little bit like a brain on the side, and I did not know that that was going to go into this piece. So some small pieces, I just make them and without having a plan in mind, and then I just put them together. And same with the other materials, I just have them on hand and they kind of come together. So I work rather intuitively when I'm in the process of making. In the beginning, I have a sort of a plan or a concept or an idea, but at the time I work quite intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's see the next one, please. And this is also part of that series.
Yeah, and this is here I am showing, like in the previous works, or especially the one in the suitcase and inside the bell jar, it's like looking at the inside of the body, and here it's like the interior and exterior of the body, but looking again, thinking of all of these like forms, but in a more in some way abstract, but relating to it. I'm also interested in the celebratory aspect of the body, and so I collect materials that are uh, related to body adornment.
Yeah.
So sequin fabrics that you would like, clothing that you would wear to a party or to
Or festival, yeah.
exactly. So I just I think I love this joyous part of nature and that we all have inherent in us, you know, in both. And I think like when we think of like especially the interior of the body or some forms of the body, like some we are kind of used to, I think through our I guess through some science, or I guess Western science, I think sometimes we're used to seeing it in a more, I guess sometimes people get, what's the word, like nauseated, or they don't want to think about organs, or they don't want, or they see it as something disgusting. And so it's sort of just looking at it, just thinking about all the functions and so much that we don't know in science, that through science, so much that we don't know, that I just think it's so beautiful. And just looking at it, my idea is to see it as something absolutely magical, which I feel it is.
Yes. And I want to talk about this other work, the next one, because it's kind of like, not this one. Well, this is a
Oh yeah, that's just a
yeah.
close up. So
Yeah.
yeah, so this has like a shape of a liver, and also that I did in porcelain, and I added these modeling using modeling trees. I attached them at the top after the work was fired. So when I make pieces in ceramic, I like poke holes in it to later to keeping in mind that I will attach things to them afterwards, or glue things to them. And there are also these forms that reference like intestines in them. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you always work with ceramics, or have you done anything different?
I think early on, like in the 2003, which is when I started doing work more professionally, I started with only clay, but I find that when I work with only one material, I really am drawn to, I'm like curious. So I want to like bring in other materials, and I like the conversation that it creates. But I haven't worked with clay in a while now. I love it. But sometimes sometimes I kind of like not depending on having to have a kiln, or not having to,
Yeah.
you know. So I kind of have, and I'm also curious about other materials. So right now in the last years, I have been working with other techniques other than clay. But I would love to go back. Yeah.
Yeah. I will. Yeah, I would love to see those works. So let's go to the next slide. This is part of an exhibition that you had, and it's like this idea of bringing nature into the exhibition space. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, so I went from like doing these more contained worlds to creating to thinking of how vast and expansive nature is, and thinking of like this really expansive botanical world that is also a full body. And as I thought about this, I brought this. I started to pay more attention to plants that are like weeds that grow uncontrollably. You know, they're not controlled by us. In fact, we're like constantly trying to repress them. And I love this idea of how in the urban space there's constantly this tension between between nature and us as a collective body, as a collective urban body, and I feel like there's this quality of like resilience and almost like rebellion of like, you know, being able to survive and thrive, and even like the most unhospitable places, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if we go to the next slide, there should be a close-up. So I used materials that reference the body. So if you well, here's a little hard to see, but I use textures that reference like the flesh, human flesh, as well as materials that are again celebratory. So I use a lot of lace and sequins and fringes and chains, and so it's sort of like we are nature, but at the same time, we have this constant, like I said, tension between both, and also with these materials, with this work, I started in the very beginning. I was combining natural plants with, these are all artificial plants. But as I worked with that, I started to reflect more and more on artificial plants and like what is our and how artificial plants are like our most kind of outrageous and extreme form of control, like our need to have this maintenance-free garden, and how these plants that mimic so perfectly many plants, the plants that they mimic are certain, you know, a selection of plants that are wanted, and also they are in their prime state. So in this work, I try to, I like this idea of deconstructing these plants that are in some way controlled, and turning them into plants that we don't want, that we're trying to constantly exterminate or, you know, hold back.
Yeah. We see the next one, please. Oh, this is the work that I wanted to talk about. This is at the Socrates Sculpture Park.
Yeah, in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, it's like thinking of like what I said earlier, of thinking of the nature, going from something contained, and here feeling like this form is part of all of nature as one big body. And here I also incorporated some anatomical forms, and used mostly, here I incorporated some natural natural plants, which I like using. And if we go to the next one, there's also this like crack in it that shows a little bit of these textures that reference like the interior of the body. So here there's like fabric, and also ceramic and polyurethane foam that I used. So it's basically, yeah, very related to all the work that I have been doing. It was in 2011. Yeah.
And did the work, I mean, did you always knew that you wanted to, that the work would look like this, or the park basically dictated the size of this sculpture?
I did.
Or the forms?
No, I had one form in mind, but once I started doing it, it's, it kind of changed a little bit. But I was not. I don't think I was like limited in size, but this was about 15 feet by 15 feet, I think, by
Wow.
15 by 10 or 12. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was big. Yeah,
Can we go to the next one, please?
yeah.
Oh, this is the
Oh,
same.
these got yes.
Yeah. The
I
next
think
one.
these were repeated. Yes.
Yeah.
The next one, so we can skip those. Yeah, and then from here, this work, as I started to think about more this relationship of nature with the urban space, I started to bring in materials that reference the dwelling or the home, and so here I use these material from home, but also in a more organic, at the same time, very organic,
We can go to the next one. This is
And
where this has like the materials that you were talking about, the lace also, and it also has this branch, and it has like also like this. I'm looking at can we go to the close up so we can? Yeah, you'll see this chains.
Yeah. So here the colors kind of change a little bit because I started to use more concrete, thinking about the urban landscape and this relationship of both, and the tension between them. And at the time I was working I had a residency at Materials for the Arts, which for people who might not know is it's a New York City agency that collects surplus materials from either individuals or companies, and they collect all of these materials and house them in a warehouse where people nonprofit organizations that have an free art programming can come and shop for free. And I always loved this place, and I was so lucky that I got a residency there so I had a studio there for like 7 months. And so I basically became a hoarder for 7 months because there's so much material. So they would like huge boxes and bags of like a lot of things from the fashion district. So there were like tons of like broken jewelry, fabrics, leather, scraps of leather. So there were many materials that I wouldn't go out that I wouldn't like buy or even think about using. But because they were there, I was like, oh, how about if I use this? This might be interesting, So that's a lot how I work. And so into this work, there are these feathers, there's scraps of leather, broken jewelry that, like I said, I would have never gone out to buy. But it was cool that it made it in. And anyway, and here I like also this idea of how nature can like slowly absorb abandoned spaces and reclaim. I like this idea of how nature reclaims what we are constantly taking away from nature.
Yes. And in the next one, I think it's the largest work that you produced there also as part of the residency. And it has, I see that it has kind of like tiles in it. And you
Yes.
were, and in your earlier conversations with like offline conversations, you were talking about this idea of the quadricula also, if you want to expand on that.
Yes. Yeah, this also was like this plastic sheeting that mimicked a tile wall. I think, I don't know how it got there, and I had never seen something like that, but because I was thinking so much about, urban spaces, I immediately grabbed it, and and this made me, as you said, reflect a lot on the grid, and thinking of the grid also as not only like urban planning in Western societies, but also thinking of like systems, like rigid systems. And I love this idea of nature breaking up all of this, breaking all of these systems. And also this plastic sheeting, so it's like representing, it's plastic sheeting of I love this idea of like a wall that is normally a, 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 a very strong structure, and very rigid structure. I love of it, the idea of it being soft, and so I used all of these fabrics behind to show it like it's eroding, and deconstructing it. And I use a lot of lace to also, so for me it's also, I guess it's an unintentional, but a lot of, I think the feminine is very present in these works. 'Cause I used materials that that are associated with femininity, and they're just materials that I like. So lace I like using a lot to present decay, and I also think of femininity as something that is often seen as delicate, but often seen as weak, but in reality is a super strong force. So I just love showing depicting lace as something that breaks down rigid forms,
And you were talking also about like the colonial ideas also in earlier conversations, and I think that the next work also references that, or the idea of time as well. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about this work, and also the materials that you used?
Yes. This is an old, like kind of a vintage basket that was found at Materials for the Arts, and again it's using the grid, but here embedding these watches that I found there, as well as fabrics, and embedding them into concrete, and thinking of how like it's a little bit of like thinking of our footprint, our human footprint, and how there are so many things that we use and toss without thinking about, but that will be here, that will decompose much later than we will. So I was thinking about that, and maybe the idea of the colonial, maybe if we could go to the next slide. Well, I think lace definitely has, I relate to colonialism, but I think I'll talk about that more in the paperworks that I think is also quite present. With this work, I started it in 2015. That was work with combining concrete. There's metal sheeting, acrylic sheeting in here, as well as leather scraps, lace, polyurethane. And I started it, but it was very raw, and I did not go back to it until 2018 when I finished it. And with this work, what I think is a little bit special is that I had started to use materials that relate to like indigenous weavings and fabrics and textiles. And with this work, I did not have in mind to include this mola, which is of the indigenous Cuna communities of Panama and Colombia. But with this work, I was looking for a fabric to put in the center, and I looked through all of my fabrics and nothing worked. And then suddenly I saw this mola that I had within my materials, and I tried it, and it was like, this is it. So I feel that sometimes the materials kind of choose to be in the work. So I feel here, I think I have a lot of respect for this. I mean, I have respect for materials in general, but I think for this, it's a very special mola because, and I'm sorry I don't have close up, but it has a figure of a woman shaman with a pipe in her mouth, and with these fans, she's fanning the fire. And I just think it's a very powerful image, and I am amazed that it made it into this work. Anyway.
So basic work, and then you found the material, and you decided to. That was like the last thing you did, right?
Well, no, I decided to put it in, and then I kind of, incorporate added things to it to make it look like it grew there by itself. But the reason I like that piece is because for me, or that piece made it in there, is because I think I feel that and especially in the work that I'm doing now, I feel like there's the indigenous ways of relating to nature, and indigenous knowledge. It's really present in my work now, and I feel that is of utmost importance, and therefore I feel that this indigenous work is very this indigenous fabric is kind of very special, that it made it into, that is part of this work. I think it's part of the message in a way. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah. Can we see
yeah, I love that there's another voice coming in.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Can we see the next one, please? I love this one too, and it has a really great story.
Yes, well, so the previous work that I showed was 2018, but in 2016, I got a residency with Dieu Donné, which is a paper making studio here in Brooklyn. Here in New York, and it was a wonderful residency because I had not worked. I had not thought about my work as two-dimensional that much. Like, I always consider myself more of a sculptor or 3D artist, working in three-dimensional forms. But working with paper pulp really expanded my language and gave me an idea of how to make these two-dimensional works in a way that I love and feel comfortable with. So this is a series from 2017 that is called the Farm Worker Tapestry Series, Latino Farm Worker Tapestry Series, and it was done first because of the 2016 election. I had not. Normally, I don't do things about Latino culture, at least not directly. But with all of the anti-immigrant rhetoric of the time, I felt as a Latina artist that it was important to highlight some of the contributions of my culture. So anyway, I had this opportunity to make these tapestries, and so it's a series of 7 tapestries that each honor Latino farm workers in the U.S. And so I picked for each tapestry a different crop. So this is the strawberry crop picker, and I included in each tapestry not only the migrant worker as the central focus of each piece, but also I included for each crop. So this is the strawberry crop. So I included the plant, the strawberry, the flower of the strawberry plant, and also the pollinators. And thinking of all of this cycle that the plant goes through in order to give fruit, and thinking of the migrant worker as part of that cycle, as part of this poetic cycle. And in each of these works there is like como un letrero, like a part at the bottom where you can say where it includes a quote from different news media about the different social economic challenges that the migrant workers face in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Can we go to the next one?
Yeah. And this is again paper. This is from 2019. And as I worked, and this work is all done in layers and is sculpted. It's done in a paper studio, meaning that when the work is still wet, I layer different sheets of paper that are pulled and are still wet, and then with a water hose, I remove part of the surface to using stencils and a water hose. I remove some of the paper pulp that's sitting on top, and it will reveal the different materials that I have embedded under it. And there's a video about it if anyone is interested in learning more about it. But this is from the Wilder Crops Festival series, and this is based on a New York Times article from 2016 of a town in Willard, Ohio, where the migrant workers would come. It's an agricultural hub where the migrant workers would come every spring to tend to the crops. But because of the anti-immigrant rhetoric that year, the town would always welcome the migrant workers with a festival, but it was canceled. All of the festivities were canceled for welcoming the migrant workers. So as I was doing this series, I was reflecting more deeply about plants also. And so I started to think about how plants are just as exploited in this system as the migrant workers are. And so I decided to make the series imagining the plants welcoming, holding the carnival for the migrant workers, and in solidarity, and also almost as a thinking of like the kinship between them. And we can go to the next. And so this is why I use very bright colors to represent the plants. And this is, for instance, called Radishes and Cabbages Parade. So they also have titles that reference the festival. And here you can also see there's a hand, like partial hand at the bottom. So there is the migrant worker is also in the work, but it's more on the sides. It's not the focus as the previous series.
Yes, I love how all these layers, and also you include, like, this doesn't do justice, but the work is like it has a lot of detail, and it has beats and all these sequins, and also the lace also. Can we see the next one, please?
And I also, these works are the format of them is inspired by Renaissance tapestry. So thinking of the tapestries were an elite symbol, and so it's also referencing colonialism. So it's kind of presenting these kind of presenting I guess these social problems, or these, but within the format of the colonial, through a colonialist window, colonialist view in some way.
Yeah. We go to the next one, please. This is another.
Yes, this is another paper piece, and this is composed of 16 panels. The Cabbages and Radishes was 8, and maybe we can go to the close-up. And this is after the Willard crops. This I completed. I did part of this work at Dieu Donné at the paper studio in 2019, but I did not finish it until 2020 while we were in the lockdown. And so it was good that these were 11 by 16 or 14 by 16 panels, so I could work on them at home. And what I do, the last step is I attach a lot of like ribbons, and here it has googly eyes, which I think it's a little hard to see.
Yeah.
They have googly eyes. They have a lot of gouache paint on top. And also these birds are birds that I did separately in paper. Also using the same techniques with the layering and using the hose, the blowout techniques. And I made those birds without thinking where they were going. So also it's like another material I have it as another material. And so these birds all made it into this piece. And this is called La Huerta y Yo, or the vegetable garden and I. And here, and it's from the kinship series. So here, the hands and plants are both in the same plane. So the hands, it's thinking not only of the farm worker, but thinking of ourselves, just, I guess it's like the farm worker as gardener, and thinking of our deep connection that is inherent in all of us, with nature, and how this connection has been lost through, you know, this modern way of life. So here it's bringing this connection that is also spiritual, and it's very much based on indigenous ways as well. And I'll talk more about that in the next works. Yeah.
This one is big, right? This is kind
This
of
is big.
Yeah.
Yes. 6 by 7 feet.
Yeah, it's like a blanket also.
Exactly. La colcha.
Sí.
Una colcha. Yes, blanket or quilt, or tapestry also. And this work I did, I completed last year, that while I was an artist in residence at the Sugarhill Children's Museum in Harlem. And this work I started with some digitally printed fabric that of different food wrappings that I collected while I was a resident at the Joan Mitchell Foundation in New Orleans. I was there in 2017 for a month, and so I collected these wrappings and I did a weaving with them. And you know, like I said, I like to experiment and work intuitively, and so I did this weaving, but many times, but I was not satisfied with the weaving as a finished piece. So when that happens, I put it aside and leave it as another material. And I did that, but I also took a photo of it and printed it onto muslin. They had at the residency, they had a 36-inch printer. And so I was able to print 2 panels of this image. And 2.5 years later, I finally got to work with them at the residency here. And when I put it together, I saw this image that was revealed of this animal-like, especially the head piece at the top. Maybe we can put the next image. And so because I had been reading and researching about indigenous ways, and I decided to go with this image and highlight it. And so all of this centerpiece where you see like a snout and eyes and ears, all of that was there. I simply outlined it. And then from there, I just added my own forms, not thinking too much about what this was exactly. This piece took 5.5 months to complete. I thought I was never going to finish it. It was very intense.
Yeah, like most of your pieces are like very labor intensive, and
Yes.
like I feel like, I don't know, I don't have the patience. But it feels like it's like a very meditative process.
Yes.
And also, like, I wanted to talk about this added, I guess I would added materials, like this flower that belonged to your mother, and also this belt that you had for a long time.
Yes. So in the very center of the image, there's a crochet flower that my mother crocheted, and she passed away 11 years ago. And it was just something that I had, and it just made it into the piece. It was not something I planned. And similarly, I guess maybe we can go to the next? I don't know if we're... well, here it shows a little bit better the fabric with the veggie sticks, like the wrappings from food. But I was saying that here you can't see, but I also incorporated like a belt from the Misak culture the Misak indigenous culture of Colombia that my mom gave me long time ago, and I wore like in my 20s, but I never was able to. I always loved it, so I didn't wear it anymore, but I never got rid of it. And also here, I think you can see there are some shells, different shells attached to it that were shells from necklaces that I also collect, that I also wore when I traveled to the Caribbean, in Colombia, and in Cuba and other areas, other places. And also I didn't wear them again for a long time, but I love them, so I kept them, and they made it into this piece also.
Yeah, and I think we can see more of these in the next piece.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And this is also a digitally printed net, like a food net that you normally would get like limes in it or avocados. Some of those nets were also like the actual nets were included in the previous piece, but here it's just a digital print on silk that I printed at the Joan Mitchell Foundation in New Orleans. And here the print is only green. So I use the net as a grid to incorporate this image of a design that is used by the Inga and Camensa indigenous culture of Colombia that are in the south near the Amazon. And they weave these belts with all of these different designs, and the designs have meanings. And actually, I have one right here to show you.
Wow.
This is one of the belts that this is a Camensa belt, and that design I think is this one. I'm not totally sure, but I think is this one. And so when I kind of drew that design into this work, into the grid, I did it using fabric behind. So the pink, yellow, and purple is actual fabric lace that I placed behind it, so that's how it was colored in. I placed it behind, and then it was embroidered. We can maybe go to the next one.
Yeah, the next one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was embroidered, and this design means la chagra. La chagra is like the vegetable or the cultivated garden for the Camensa. But it's not as simple as that. Like, it's not, the meaning is much more profound. And I don't know if we have time. There's a quote that one of the Camensa women explains beautifully.
You should we should read it.
Okay. Do you want to do it?
I don't have it
so much.
I don't have it here.
Okay. I can read it.
But we have about 12 minutes, so and we have one last work.
Okay, yeah, let's go. Let me see if I have it here. Yes, I have it here. I'm gonna read it just in English. La chagra is a single fabric that can lead to external and internal physical and spiritual reflections at different scales, few or many possibilities. The external ones recognize la chagra as a physical space that can be contemplated, a site of interaction where a polyculture is visible and no longer a monoculture. It is organic, it is in apparent disorder, as it is sometimes called on a first impression, or a quasi-forest, which leads us to recognize this space with different possibilities of existence and interaction, biological diversity, or colorful life. Thus, the grandmothers and grandfathers say that La Chagra is life, it is wisdom, it is mathematics, it is food and medicine through the colors that nourish to give health, to live longer, to feel the rich flavor in the soup, to see animals that visit the farm, including hummingbirds, bees, butterflies, that approach the flowers, and squirrels that come for corn or fruit. And that is Aura Tisoy Tandioy from the Inga Quintecocha woman of the Valle de Sibundoy. She's a biologist.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Where do you find that? I guess investigating and
yes. Online. I don't have here exact the site, but I do have it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's just thinking of the cultivated space as a very different, it's not just the garden. It is another very special space, and that I think we all need to learn from.
And I think it also connects to the work, as a, thinking about agriculture and how, I guess the monocultivo always like ruins all types of, existence, and, thinking about the how this is a more sustainable way of thinking of the poly.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about food and also sustainability. So,
Right. No, I think it's not just changing. It's not changing what we eat or all of those things are important, but I think it's mainly thinking how just the way we think, changing our mentality, I think is what is needed. And I think we all would have a richer life, than what we have under this system, I think.
Right. And then it's kind of embracing difference, also makes me think about Glissant and his way of thinking. Let's go to the next one.
Yes. So we can, in case there are questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here the shells are holding together the different layers, and these are very delicate shells from different necklaces that I used to have, that I used to wear. We can go to the next.
Yes, I think this is the last.
And this is again another digital print of a food net, that I embedded this other design that means el zaparro or the basket. And in the Inca Mensa culture, basically the basket is filled with goods, and when it's brought to a family, when they visit another family, they bring the basket filled with goods, and then the family fills it with other goods to take back. And so it's sort of like this idea of mutual aid, and thinking of like also other alternative economies, and also reciprocity. So it's just kind of embedding. I like this idea of embedding these other ways of living, embedding it into what we know. Yeah, what we know in the system. Yeah.
We have a close-up here in the next slide.
Yeah, and this work, there are two of these, and the previous one, they each took 2 months to do. So it was in some way it was good that I had the pandemic or most of the pandemic because we're still in it to do them, but because they took so long.
Mm-hmm.
But it also made me think a lot about time, and I felt, even though, as you said, it is very it could be relaxing and it could be like meditative. At times it was like, this is taking me way too long. Why?
Yeah.
I was very impatient also, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel that, I think we as artists are pressured to produce a lot, and I think so. It made me think about that, and I want to kind of, how can we free away from that? How can we
Yeah.
break from that? And yes, at times it was meditative, but not when you live in this in this world, where you're bombarded with work, I feel.
Yeah. Especially here in New York, I feel that it's really
Yeah,
intense.
and to be productive is like
Right.
the
Yeah.
what everyone, what you're praised for being productive,
Right, yeah. And like people always romanticize this idea of like being overworked and like,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
wait, when I don't know, I feel it when I go back to my country. I'm like,
yeah, yes,
everything is like so like relaxed, and I mean it's an island in the Caribbean. What
yeah,
can you
yeah,
ask for? But
yeah,
um, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Being busy is like
yeah.
what everybody, yeah, what is looked up to.
And I always, I mean, I found that super interesting from your work because I feel that every aspect of your work is like has so much like deep meaning or integrates nature and the body, and it's like very much thinking about those ideas. And how can you, I don't know, I find it fascinating the way like you incorporate all of these ideas while living in the city, and you've been here like I don't know how many years, but because you
Mhm.
grew up here also.
Well, I grew up in Colombia, but I've lived here since I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I was born here and moved to Colombia when I was 7 years old. And so I only lived in Colombia like 10 years of my life, but I have a very strong um, like attachment
Yeah,
or
connection
connection, yeah,
with the land and everything.
especially with the land. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and now I'm thinking a lot about my ancestors and ancestral knowledge also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people went back to thinking about these things in
Mhm.
during the pandemic, and still think about all these. I don't know. I feel it a lot.
Mhm.
It's been really intense, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
it's very intense times.
yeah. So we have like 3 minutes, and Jaime said such a good point about productivity when there are commissions.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, I wanted to know what are your like next projects, if you want to share anything in this like 2 minutes that we have. And also thank you
uh,
so much for being here and being, in conversation with me. I
no,
really love your work.
thanks so much. Thank you. Well, I'm honored. Um, I'm going to have a survey show. So some of these early works you
Mm-hmm.
will probably be able to see in this fall with Hunter College
Mm-hmm.
um, and Coda. Coda is a new nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
So they are organizing. Um, it's going to be a small survey show, but it'll be nice to bring some of these works out that I haven't seen actually myself in a
And
while.
yeah.
Yeah. So so yes, so I have that, And there are other shows, but that I don't think I can discuss yet.
Well,
I'm in some. Also, I have a group show. I'm in a group show with a new organization called the Barnes Center, which is part of the New York State's Art Weekend. That it opens this Friday. So if anyone is going up to check out the exhibits upstate this weekend, you can check that out. It's called Tasting Menu, and it's all around food.
wow.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting artists in it too. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and also, you know, having the time to discuss your work. And everyone, make sure to look for Lina's work. And if you're up in upstate, make sure to visit the exhibition.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in and for the interest. And we'll be in touch. Gracias, Natalia.
Gracias.
And American Society. Bye-bye.
Bye.